Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows a situation where an Aramark employee receives two different sets of dietary restriction information for the same client from two different sources within a short time frame. One source is a written note from the client's caregiver, and the other is a verbal instruction from a different staff member who previously interacted with the client. The employee is unsure which set of instructions is current and accurate. Option A. The employee should proceed with the dietary restrictions provided by the staff member who gave the verbal instruction, assuming it is the most recent update. Option B. The employee should immediately contact the client's primary caregiver or designated point of contact to verify the correct dietary restrictions before preparing or serving any food. Option C. The employee should prepare a standard meal that accommodates common dietary needs, assuming the conflicting information is a minor oversight. Option D. The employee should use the written note from the caregiver, as written documentation is generally considered more reliable than verbal instructions. The correct answer is B. The employee should immediately contact the client's primary caregiver or designated point of contact to verify the correct dietary restrictions before preparing or serving any food. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a scenario where an Aramark employee is presented with conflicting information regarding a client's dietary restrictions. This is professionally challenging because it directly impacts the health and safety of the client, a core responsibility in food service. Misinterpreting or ignoring these restrictions can lead to severe health consequences, reputational damage for Aramark, and potential legal liabilities. Careful judgment is required to prioritize accurate information and ensure adherence to established protocols. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes direct communication with the client or their designated representative to clarify the conflicting information. This aligns with Aramark's commitment to client satisfaction and safety, and implicitly with general food safety regulations that mandate accurate allergen and dietary restriction management. By seeking direct clarification, the employee demonstrates diligence, a commitment to accuracy, and a proactive approach to risk mitigation, ensuring the client receives food that meets their specific needs without compromise. This also upholds ethical principles of honesty and care towards the client. An incorrect approach that involves making an assumption based on the most recent information received without verification is professionally unacceptable. This fails to acknowledge the potential severity of dietary restrictions and could lead to a serious health incident. It demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for established safety protocols, potentially violating Aramark's internal policies and general food safety guidelines that require absolute certainty regarding allergens and dietary needs. Another incorrect approach, such as proceeding with the last known restriction without attempting to resolve the conflict, is also professionally unacceptable. This shows a passive and potentially negligent attitude towards client safety. It prioritizes expediency over accuracy and client well-being, which is a direct contravention of ethical duties and Aramark service standards. A third incorrect approach, which is to ignore the conflicting information and proceed with a standard meal, is the most egregious. This demonstrates a complete disregard for the client's specific needs and a failure to uphold the fundamental duty of care. It exposes the client to significant health risks and represents a severe breach of professional conduct, potentially leading to legal repercussions and severe damage to Aramark's reputation. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a clear hierarchy of actions. 1. Identify the conflict or discrepancy. 2. Assess the potential impact of the discrepancy, especially concerning health and safety. 3. Prioritize direct communication and verification with the source of information or the affected party. 4. Document all communications and decisions made. 5. Escalate the issue if clarification cannot be obtained or if the situation poses an immediate risk. This systematic approach ensures that client safety and satisfaction are paramount. Question 2. System analysis indicates a long-term client at a catering event is expressing dissatisfaction with the beverage selection offered, stating it does not meet the expectations set during the initial booking consultation. The client is requesting an immediate and substantial change to the entire beverage menu, which would require significant last-minute procurement and logistical adjustments. As the on-site Aramark manager, what is the most appropriate course of action? Option A. Inform the client that the beverage menu was finalized and agreed upon during booking, and that no changes can be made at this stage, as it would disrupt operations and incur additional costs. Option B. Listen to the client's specific concerns regarding the beverage selection. Review the original booking details and Aramark's current inventory and logistical capabilities, and then propose a revised beverage plan that addresses their core dissatisfaction while remaining feasible and compliant with event parameters. Option C. Acknowledge the client's concern, apologize for any perceived shortfall, and immediately initiate the requested changes to ensure client satisfaction, prioritizing their immediate request above all else. Option D. Offer a partial refund for the beverage service and suggest the client source their preferred beverages independently for the remainder of the event to resolve the issue quickly. The correct answer is C. Acknowledge the client's concern, apologize for any perceived shortfall, and immediately initiate the requested changes to ensure client satisfaction, prioritizing their immediate request above all else. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in a service-oriented environment like Aramark, where maintaining high standards of customer service and operational efficiency is paramount. The core challenge lies in balancing immediate customer needs with established company policies and procedures designed to ensure fairness, safety, and consistent service delivery. A rushed or overly accommodating response could lead to precedent-setting issues, operational disruptions, or even safety concerns, while a rigid adherence to policy without considering the customer's perspective might damage the customer relationship and Aramark's reputation. Need for quick, effective problem-solving while upholding company values and regulatory compliance requires careful judgment. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured problem-solving process that prioritizes understanding the customer's issue, assessing the situation against company policy and operational capabilities, and then proposing a solution that is both fair to the customer and compliant with Aramark's guidelines. This approach demonstrates empathy and a commitment to customer satisfaction while maintaining operational integrity. It involves active listening, clear communication, and a willingness to explore reasonable accommodations within established parameters. This aligns with Aramark's likely commitment to customer service excellence and ethical business practices, ensuring that decisions are made with a holistic view of the customer experience and operational impact. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach is to immediately grant the customer's request without fully understanding the underlying issue or its implications. This could lead to setting an unsustainable precedent, potentially causing operational difficulties or financial losses, and may violate Aramark's policies regarding service delivery or resource allocation. Demonstrates a lack of due diligence and could be seen as unprofessional by other staff members or management. Another incorrect approach is to rigidly adhere to policy without any attempt to find a mutually agreeable solution or to explain the rationale behind the policy to the customer. This can result in customer dissatisfaction, negative reviews, and damage to Aramark's brand reputation. It fails to demonstrate customer centricity and can be perceived as unhelpful or uncaring, potentially leading to a loss of business. A third incorrect approach is to make a decision based on personal bias or convenience rather than on established procedures and the specific circumstances of the situation. This undermines fairness, consistency, and professionalism. It can lead to accusations of favoritism or discrimination and erodes trust within the organization and with customers. Such an approach disregards the importance of objective decision-making and adherence to company standards. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach such situations by first actively listening to and empathizing with the customer's concern. Next, they should gather all necessary information to understand the context and identify any potential policy or operational constraints. Then, they should evaluate possible solutions, considering Aramark's policies, operational feasibility, and the impact on customer satisfaction. Finally, they should communicate the chosen solution clearly and professionally to the customer, explaining the reasoning if necessary, and ensuring that the resolution aligns with Aramark's commitment to service and ethical conduct. Question 3. The monitoring system demonstrates a brief, isolated spike in temperature readings within a food preparation area, which then returns to normal parameters within 2 minutes. No other related systems show any anomalies, and there are no immediate reports of unusual conditions from staff in the area. Option A. Initiate a full system diagnostic and alert the facility manager to a potential equipment malfunction. Option B. Contact the equipment manufacturer for immediate on-site repair based on the single temperature spike. Option C. Log the event for trend analysis and continue normal operations as the reading returned to normal quickly. Option D. Immediately cease all food preparation in the area and evacuate staff pending a full investigation. Correct answer is A. Initiate a full system diagnostic and alert the facility manager to a potential equipment malfunction. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential for misinterpreting data and the subsequent impact on operational efficiency and compliance. The core difficulty lies in distinguishing between a genuine system anomaly that requires immediate investigation and a transient fluctuation that can be safely disregarded. Careful judgment is required to avoid unnecessary resource allocation or, conversely, overlooking a critical issue that could lead to service disruption or regulatory noncompliance. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based investigation. By cross-referencing the anomaly with other relevant data points and consulting with the appropriate technical teams, it ensures that any action taken is informed and proportionate. This aligns with the principles of due diligence and responsible operational management, which are implicitly expected in any professional setting, including those governed by Aramark's operational standards and any applicable health and safety regulations. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of both false positives and false negatives, safeguarding operational integrity. An incorrect approach that immediately escalates the issue without further verification represents a failure in professional judgment and resource management. It can lead to wasted time and resources investigating non-existent problems, potentially distracting from genuine issues. Ethically, it can also create unnecessary alarm. Another incorrect approach, which is to ignore the anomaly assuming it will resolve itself, is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This demonstrates a lack of diligence and a disregard for potential system failures that could impact service delivery or safety. Such inaction could violate operational protocols and potentially lead to breaches of service-level agreements or health and safety regulations if the anomaly is indicative of a more serious underlying problem. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that involves 1. Initial observation and data gathering. 2. Contextualization of the observation within broader system performance. 3. Consultation with subject matter experts. And 4. A tiered response based on the assessed severity and likelihood of impact. This structured approach ensures that decisions are rational, data-driven, and aligned with professional responsibilities. Question 4. Assessment of an Aramark employee's ethical and regulatory responsibilities when they discover sensitive operational details about a current client that could significantly benefit a proposal for a prospective client. The employee is considering how to best utilize this information without violating any professional standards or legal requirements. Option A. Use the discovered operational details to subtly tailor the proposal for the prospective client without explicitly mentioning the source. Option B. Disregard the discovered operational details as proprietary information of the current client and proceed with a generic proposal for the prospective client. Option C. Directly share the discovered operational details with the prospective client to highlight Aramark's understanding and capabilities. Option D. Consult with Aramark's legal department to understand the implications of using the information and to determine the appropriate course of action. The correct answer is C. Directly share the discovered operational details with the prospective client to highlight Aramark's understanding and capabilities. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge involving potential conflicts of interest and the ethical obligation to maintain client confidentiality, particularly within the context of Aramark's operations, which often involve sensitive client data and relationships. The core difficulty lies in balancing the desire to leverage internal knowledge for business development with the strict requirements of data privacy and non-disclosure agreements. A hasty or ill-considered decision could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and a breach of trust with clients. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and regulatory compliance by prioritizing the protection of confidential client information. This aligns with general principles of data privacy and professional integrity expected of employees in any organization handling sensitive data, including Aramark. By seeking guidance from the legal department, the employee ensures that any action taken is fully compliant with relevant laws and company policies, thereby safeguarding both the company and its clients from potential harm. This proactive step is crucial for maintaining Aramark's reputation and fostering long-term client relationships built on trust. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves directly sharing the client's internal operational details with a prospective client without explicit authorization. This constitutes a clear breach of confidentiality and likely violates data privacy regulations and contractual obligations Aramark has with its existing client. Such an action could lead to legal penalties, termination of contracts, and severe damage to Aramark's credibility. Another incorrect approach is to use the information to tailor a proposal without acknowledging the source or seeking permission. While seemingly less direct, this still leverages confidential information inappropriately. It raises ethical concerns about intellectual property and fair competition, and could still lead to legal challenges if the information is deemed proprietary or if the existing client discovers its misuse. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss the information as irrelevant and proceed with a generic proposal. This fails to capitalize on a potential competitive advantage that could be ethically leveraged, and more importantly, it misses an opportunity to demonstrate a deep understanding of client needs, which is a core aspect of effective business development. While not a direct breach, it represents a failure in professional judgment and strategic thinking. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing similar situations should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, identify the core ethical and regulatory considerations, such as confidentiality, data privacy, and potential conflicts of interest. Second, consult relevant internal policies and seek advice from designated departments, such as legal or compliance, before taking any action. Third, always prioritize client trust and contractual obligations. Finally, document all decisions and consultations to ensure accountability and provide a clear record of due diligence. Question 5. Comparative studies suggest that initial impressions can significantly influence hiring decisions. Imagine you are a hiring manager at Aramark tasked with filling a critical role. You've interviewed several candidates, and one, in particular, made a strong positive first impression due to their charisma and apparent enthusiasm. However, during the interview, their responses to specific questions about problem-solving and past project management experiences were somewhat vague, lacking concrete examples. You feel a strong inclination to move forward with this candidate, believing their positive demeanor will translate into success. What is the most professionally sound approach to proceed? Option A. Conduct further interviews with a focus on behavioral questions and request specific examples of past achievements to validate their skills and experience against the job requirements. Option B. Immediately extend a job offer, as their strong initial impression and enthusiasm are indicators of future success and cultural fit. Option C. Focus on their positive attributes and downplay the vagueness in their responses, believing that with some on-the-job training, they will quickly adapt. Option D. Trust your initial positive impression and charisma, assuming their enthusiasm will overcome any perceived gaps in specific experience. The correct answer is A. Conduct further interviews with a focus on behavioral questions and request specific examples of past achievements to validate their skills and experience against the job requirements. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge rooted in the potential for unconscious bias to influence hiring decisions, even when candidates appear qualified on paper. The hiring manager must navigate the delicate balance between recognizing a candidate's potential and ensuring a fair, objective evaluation process that adheres to Aramark's commitment to equal employment opportunity and relevant U.S. labor laws. The pressure to fill a role quickly can exacerbate this challenge, leading to rushed judgments. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, multifaceted evaluation that moves beyond initial impressions. This includes seeking objective evidence of the candidate's skills and experience through behavioral interview questions, requesting specific examples of past performance, and potentially incorporating a skills-based assessment or a trial period. This method aligns with best practices in fair hiring, aiming to mitigate bias by focusing on demonstrable competencies rather than subjective feelings. It upholds the principles of equal employment opportunity by ensuring all candidates are assessed against the same objective criteria, thereby preventing discrimination based on protected characteristics. This approach is also consistent with the spirit of regulations like Title Roman VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which prohibits employment discrimination. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves relying heavily on a gut feeling or immediate rapport without seeking corroborating evidence. This is professionally unacceptable because it opens the door to unconscious bias, where subjective preferences or stereotypes can inadvertently influence the decision, potentially leading to discrimination against equally or more qualified candidates. This approach fails to meet the ethical obligation of fairness and can violate anti-discrimination laws by prioritizing personal affinity over objective qualifications. Another incorrect approach is to overlook potential red flags or areas of concern raised during the initial screening, because of a desire to maintain a positive impression or avoid difficult conversations. This is professionally unsound as it compromises the integrity of the hiring process. It can lead to hiring an unsuitable candidate, which is detrimental to the team and the company, and it fails to uphold the duty of due diligence in assessing a candidate's fit and capabilities. Ethically, it can be seen as a dereliction of responsibility to make a well-informed hiring decision. A third incorrect approach is to prematurely dismiss the candidate based on a single perceived weakness without exploring it further or considering mitigating factors. This is professionally problematic because it can lead to the loss of potentially valuable talent. It demonstrates a lack of thoroughness and can be a manifestation of confirmation bias, where the evaluator seeks to confirm an initial negative impression. This can also lead to unintentional discrimination if the perceived weakness is indirectly linked to a protected characteristic. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes objectivity and fairness. This involves establishing clear, job-related criteria for evaluation before reviewing candidates. During the interview process, structured questioning techniques should be used to elicit specific behavioral examples. All information gathered should be systematically documented and reviewed against the predefined criteria. When uncertainties arise, further investigation or consultation with colleagues can provide a more balanced perspective. This systematic approach helps to ensure that decisions are based on merit and qualifications, minimizing the impact of bias and adhering to legal and ethical standards. Question 6. Strategic planning requires a proactive approach to operational challenges. Imagine a scenario where a significant food spoilage incident occurs at a major Aramark client's facility, leading to substantial product loss and client dissatisfaction. The facility manager reports the spoilage, citing potential issues with the on-site refrigeration system. As an operations manager, what is the most appropriate initial step to take to address this situation effectively and professionally? Option A. Offer the client a standard financial compensation package for the lost product and assure them that such incidents are rare without delving into the specific cause. Option B. Immediately assume the spoilage is due to staff negligence and initiate disciplinary proceedings against the on-site food service team. Option C. Immediately implement a company-wide review of refrigeration maintenance protocols and issue a directive for enhanced temperature monitoring across all facilities to prevent future occurrences. Option D. Dispatch a team to conduct a thorough on-site investigation, interviewing the facility manager and relevant staff, inspecting the refrigeration units, and reviewing inventory and delivery logs to determine the precise cause of the spoilage. The correct answer is C. Immediately implement a company-wide review of refrigeration maintenance protocols and issue a directive for enhanced temperature monitoring across all facilities to prevent future occurrences. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in a service-oriented business like Aramark, where maintaining consistent quality and customer satisfaction across diverse locations is paramount. The challenge lies in balancing the need for standardized operational procedures, which ensure efficiency and brand integrity, with the necessity of adapting to unique local conditions, customer preferences, and potential unforeseen issues. A failure to adequately address these local nuances can lead to decreased client satisfaction, operational inefficiencies, and potential reputational damage. The pressure to quickly resolve the issue while adhering to Aramark's established protocols and client agreements adds a layer of complexity. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates a commitment to understanding the root cause of the problem by gathering specific, localized information before implementing a solution. This aligns with best professional practices in client management and operational problem solving. By engaging with the site manager and understanding the specific context of the food spoilage, e.g., equipment malfunction, delivery delays, specific menu items affected, the operations manager can tailor a solution that is both effective and efficient. This proactive and investigative approach respects the client's operational environment and fosters trust. It also allows for the identification of systemic issues that might affect other locations, promoting continuous improvement. This aligns with the ethical principles of diligence and competence, ensuring that actions are informed and appropriate. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing a broad, company-wide policy change without investigating the specific incident. This is a regulatory and ethical failure because it is an overreaction that may not address the actual cause of the spoilage. It can lead to unnecessary costs, operational disruptions at other locations where the problem doesn't exist, and can be perceived by the affected client as dismissive of their unique circumstances. This approach lacks due diligence and fails to apply a reasoned, evidence-based solution. Another incorrect approach is to simply offer a standard financial compensation to the client without investigating the cause or proposing corrective actions. While financial compensation might be part of a resolution, it fails to address the underlying operational issue. This is a failure of professional responsibility as it does not aim to prevent recurrence, potentially leading to future spoilage incidents and continued client dissatisfaction. It prioritizes a quick fix over a sustainable solution and neglects the duty to ensure operational excellence. A third incorrect approach is to blame the local staff without sufficient evidence. This is a significant ethical and professional failure. It undermines team morale, erodes trust, and is a premature judgment that bypasses a thorough investigation. Without understanding the contributing factors, such as supplier issues, equipment failures, or inadequate training, assigning blame is unprofessional and counterproductive. It prevents the identification of systemic problems and can lead to unfair disciplinary actions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach problem solving by first seeking to understand the specific context and root cause of an issue. This involves active listening, gathering data, and consulting with relevant stakeholders. The decision-making process should then involve evaluating potential solutions based on their effectiveness, efficiency, cost-benefit, and alignment with organizational policies and ethical standards. A structured approach, such as a root cause analysis, followed by the development and implementation of a targeted solution, is crucial. Professionals must also consider the impact of their decisions on clients, employees, and the organization's reputation, always striving for solutions that promote long-term success and client satisfaction. Question 7. To address the challenge of ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations during the onboarding process for new hires, a hiring manager at Aramark is unsure whether certain optional demographic information requested on the application form is permissible under the Aramark hiring assessment tests governing regulatory framework. The manager has received conflicting informal advice from colleagues regarding the necessity and legality of collecting this data. Option A. Consult with Aramark's legal department or designated compliance officer to obtain a definitive interpretation of the relevant data privacy laws and company policies before proceeding with the collection of this demographic information. Option B. Rely on the informal advice from colleagues who have been with the company longer, as they likely have practical experience with what is acceptable. Option C. Immediately remove the optional demographic questions from the application form to avoid any potential compliance issues, even if this data could be beneficial for internal analysis. Option D. Proceed with collecting the demographic information as it is optional and may provide valuable insights for diversity reporting, assuming that optional data collection is generally permissible. The correct answer is A. Consult with Aramark's legal department or designated compliance officer to obtain a definitive interpretation of the relevant data privacy laws and company policies before proceeding with the collection of this demographic information. Explanation. The scenario presents a common challenge in regulatory compliance, balancing the need for efficient operations with the imperative to adhere to strict data privacy regulations. Aramark, as a company handling sensitive employee and customer information, must navigate these complexities. The professional challenge lies in interpreting and applying the relevant regulations to a practical situation, ensuring that data handling practices are both effective and compliant, thereby avoiding significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of trust. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing a thorough understanding and application of the Aramark hiring assessment test specified regulatory framework, which is assumed to align with U.S. federal and state data privacy laws, e.g., GDPR if applicable to international operations, CCPA for California, and general principles of data minimization and security. This involves a proactive stance of seeking clarification from legal counsel or a dedicated compliance officer when ambiguity arises, ensuring that any data processing activities are legally sound and ethically responsible. This approach upholds the principle of accountability and due diligence, which are cornerstones of regulatory compliance. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with data collection without explicit confirmation of its necessity or legal basis would represent a failure to adhere to the principle of data minimization, a core tenet of most data privacy regulations. This could lead to the collection of superfluous data, increasing the risk of breaches and violating the purpose limitation principle, which states data should only be collected for specified, explicit, and legitimate purposes. Another incorrect approach, such as relying solely on informal advice from a non-legal colleague, would fail to meet the standard of professional due diligence and could expose the company to significant legal risk due to misinterpretation of complex regulations. Finally, an approach that involves deleting all potentially sensitive data without proper assessment or consultation would be inefficient and could hinder legitimate business operations, demonstrating a lack of balanced judgment and potentially violating data retention policies. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process when faced with regulatory ambiguity. This involves 1. Identifying the specific regulatory requirement in question. 2. Assessing the potential risks and consequences of noncompliance. 3. Consulting official documentation and internal compliance policies. 4. Seeking expert advice from legal counsel or compliance officers when necessary. 5. Documenting the decision-making process and the rationale behind the chosen course of action. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with both legal obligations and ethical standards. Question 8. Governance review demonstrates Aramark's commitment to enhancing operational efficiency through process streamlining. To achieve this, a proposal suggests consolidating all compliance oversight responsibilities within the legal department, arguing that their expertise best positions them to interpret and enforce regulations. This approach aims to centralize control and reduce perceived duplication of effort across departments. Option A. Delegate all compliance oversight to the legal department, leveraging their specialized knowledge to interpret and enforce all relevant regulations. Option B. Focus compliance efforts solely on responding to new regulatory changes as they are officially announced, without proactive monitoring or internal audits. Option C. Establish a cross-functional compliance committee with representatives from legal, operations, HR, and finance to develop and oversee compliance policies and procedures. Option D. Implement compliance measures based on informal feedback and anecdotal evidence gathered from the department, experiencing the most frequent compliance-related inquiries. The correct answer is C. Establish a cross-functional compliance committee with representatives from legal, operations, HR, and finance to develop and oversee compliance policies and procedures. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing operational efficiency with robust compliance. The company is seeking to streamline its internal processes, which is a common business objective. However, the proposed method of delegating compliance oversight to a single department without adequate cross-functional input or independent verification risks creating blind spots and potential breaches. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it acknowledges the interconnectedness of compliance across different business functions. By establishing a dedicated compliance committee with representation from key departments, the company ensures that diverse perspectives are considered, potential risks are identified from multiple angles, and a more comprehensive and effective compliance framework is developed. This aligns with the principles of good corporate governance, which emphasize transparency, accountability, and the establishment of checks and balances. Regulatory frameworks often mandate or strongly encourage such multi-stakeholder approaches to compliance to ensure thoroughness and prevent siloed decision-making that could lead to oversight failures. An incorrect approach that relies solely on the legal department for all compliance matters fails to recognize that compliance extends beyond purely legal interpretation. Operational departments often have unique insights into practical implementation challenges and potential risks that legal teams may not fully appreciate. This siloed approach can lead to policies that are legally sound but operationally unworkable or ineffective in preventing actual noncompliance. Another incorrect approach, which involves implementing compliance measures based on anecdotal evidence from a single department, is inherently flawed. Compliance requires a systematic and data-driven approach. Relying on informal observations or isolated incidents without proper investigation or broader data analysis can lead to misdiagnosis of issues and the implementation of inappropriate or insufficient controls. This can result in regulatory scrutiny and potential penalties. A third incorrect approach, which focuses on compliance only when a specific regulatory change is announced, demonstrates a reactive rather than proactive stance. Effective compliance requires continuous monitoring and adaptation to the evolving regulatory landscape, not just responding to direct mandates. This reactive approach increases the risk of falling behind on compliance obligations and facing penalties for past noncompliance. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough risk assessment, understanding the scope of applicable regulations, and engaging relevant stakeholders. Professionals should advocate for a structured approach to compliance that includes clear policies, regular training, independent monitoring, and a mechanism for continuous improvement. Prioritizing a proactive, integrated, and well-resourced compliance function is crucial for long-term organizational health and avoiding regulatory pitfalls. Question 9. The assessment process reveals that an Aramark hiring manager has a close personal friendship with one of the candidates being considered for a key position. The manager is aware of this relationship and its potential to influence their professional judgment, even if unintentionally. What is the most appropriate course of action for the hiring manager to take? Option A. Proceed with the evaluation of the candidate as usual, believing their professional judgment is strong enough to remain impartial despite the personal friendship. Option B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and request guidance on how to proceed, ensuring the integrity of the hiring process is maintained. Option C. Discreetly advocate for the candidate to other members of the hiring committee, highlighting their strengths in a way that subtly favors them due to the personal connection. Option D. Avoid any direct involvement in the candidate's evaluation process without informing their supervisor, hoping to sidestep the conflict without official acknowledgement. Correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct supervisor and request guidance on how to proceed, ensuring the integrity of the hiring process is maintained. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an Aramark employee to navigate a situation where a potential conflict of interest might arise, impacting the integrity of the hiring process. The employee must balance their professional duty to Aramark with their personal relationship, ensuring that fairness and impartiality are maintained. The challenge lies in recognizing the potential for bias, even if unintentional, and taking appropriate steps to mitigate it, thereby upholding Aramark's commitment to ethical hiring practices. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach demonstrates best professional practice by prioritizing transparency and adherence to Aramark's established conflict of interest policy. By disclosing the personal relationship to their supervisor, the employee acts ethically and in accordance with regulatory expectations for maintaining a fair and unbiased hiring process. This proactive disclosure allows Aramark to implement appropriate safeguards, such as reassigning the candidate's evaluation or ensuring a multi-person review, thereby preventing any perception or reality of favoritism. This aligns with general principles of corporate governance and employment law that mandate fair and non-discriminatory hiring. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves proceeding with the evaluation without disclosure. This is professionally unacceptable because it creates a significant risk of perceived or actual bias. Ethically, it violates the principle of impartiality in hiring. From a regulatory standpoint, It could be seen as a failure to uphold Aramark's internal policies and potentially violate broader employment regulations that require fair consideration of all candidates. Another incorrect approach is to subtly influence the hiring decision in favor of the acquaintance. This is a severe ethical and professional failure. It constitutes a breach of trust, undermines the integrity of the hiring process, and could lead to legal repercussions for both the employee and Aramark if discriminatory practices are discovered. It directly contravenes the principles of merit-based hiring and fair employment. A third incorrect approach is to avoid the candidate altogether without informing anyone, while seemingly avoiding direct bias. This can also be problematic. It might lead to a missed opportunity to hire a qualified candidate if the acquaintance is indeed the best fit. Furthermore, it doesn't address the underlying conflict of interest proactively and could lead to suspicion or questions later if the relationship becomes known. It fails to engage with Aramark's established procedures for managing such situations. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing potential conflicts of interest should follow a clear decision-making process. 1. Identify the potential conflict. Recognize any personal relationships or external interests that could influence professional judgment. 2. Consult policies. Review company policies on conflicts of interest and ethical conduct. 3. Disclose proactively. Inform the appropriate supervisor or designated authority about the potential conflict. 4. Follow guidance. Adhere to the instructions provided by management on how to proceed, which may involve recusal, reassignment of duties, or enhanced oversight. 5. Maintain objectivity. Ensure all actions taken are fair, impartial, and in the best interest of the organization. Question 10. Cost-benefit analysis shows that a new manufacturing process could significantly reduce operational expenses, but preliminary assessments indicate a potential for increased wastewater discharge with certain chemical byproducts. The company is operating under the jurisdiction of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA regulations. Which of the following represents the most responsible and legally compliant course of action? Option A. Implement the new process with minimal modifications, assuming that existing wastewater treatment facilities will be sufficient to handle any changes. Option B. Proceed with the new process immediately to realize cost savings and address any potential environmental issues if they arise and are reported. Option C. Seek legal counsel to find interpretations of EPA regulations that might permit the new process with limited environmental controls. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive environmental impact assessment and consult with regulatory experts to ensure full compliance with EPA regulations before implementing the new process. The correct answer is B. Proceed with the new process immediately to realize cost savings and address any potential environmental issues if they arise and are reported. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge where a company is considering a new operational process that could lead to cost savings, but also carries potential environmental risks. The challenge lies in balancing financial incentives with the imperative to comply with environmental regulations and uphold ethical responsibilities. A hasty decision based solely on cost-benefit analysis without thorough due diligence on regulatory compliance and potential harm would be professionally negligent. The need for careful judgment stems from the potential for significant financial penalties, reputational damage, and actual environmental harm if regulatory requirements are not met, or if the process is implemented without adequate safeguards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves prioritizing regulatory compliance and environmental stewardship over immediate cost savings. This aligns with the principles of responsible corporate citizenship and the legal framework governing environmental protection. Best professional practice dictates that any new process must undergo a comprehensive environmental impact assessment and a thorough review against all applicable environmental laws and regulations. This proactive approach ensures that potential risks are identified and mitigated before implementation, thereby preventing legal violations, fines, and environmental damage. Adhering to regulations is not merely a legal obligation, but an ethical imperative to protect public health and the environment. Incorrect approach is analysis. Implementing the new process solely based on the projected cost savings, without a detailed assessment of its environmental impact and compliance with regulations, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This approach prioritizes profit over safety and legality, which is a direct contravention of environmental protection laws, demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a disregard for potential harm. Another incorrect approach would be to proceed with the process, but only address environmental concerns if they become apparent during operation. This reactive stance is legally precarious and ethically unsound. It implies a willingness to risk non-compliance and environmental damage, which can lead to severe penalties and reputational damage. It fails to meet the standard of proactive risk management expected of responsible organizations. A third incorrect approach would be to seek loopholes or interpretations of regulations that allow for the implementation of the process with minimal environmental controls, even if the spirit of the law suggests otherwise. This demonstrates a lack of integrity and a failure to uphold ethical standards, potentially leading to legal challenges and public distrust. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a decision should adopt a structured decision-making process. First, they must identify all relevant regulatory frameworks and legal obligations pertaining to the proposed process and its potential environmental impact. Second, they should conduct a thorough risk assessment, including an environmental impact study, to understand the potential consequences of the new process. Third, they must evaluate the proposed process against these identified risks and regulatory requirements, seeking expert advice where necessary. Fourth, they should consider alternative processes or modifications that achieve the desired cost savings while ensuring full compliance and minimizing environmental harm. Finally, the decision should be documented, with clear justification based on compliance, risk mitigation, and ethical considerations, rather than solely on financial projections. Question 11. Consider a scenario where an Aramark employee involved in vendor selection discovers that a close personal friend is a key stakeholder in one of the bidding companies. The employee has not yet made a final decision on the vendor. What is the most appropriate course of action for the employee to take? Option A. Discuss the situation privately with their friend to ensure the friend understands the employee's professional obligations and to agree on how to proceed without impacting the selection. Option B. Continue with the vendor selection process as planned, assuming their personal relationship will not influence their professional judgment. Option C. Inform the bidding company's representative that their personal relationship might create a conflict and suggest they withdraw their bid to avoid complications. Option D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the company's compliance department for guidance, and to allow for an objective review of the situation. The correct answer is D. Immediately disclose the personal relationship to their direct manager and the company's compliance department for guidance, and to allow for an objective review of the situation. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in a corporate environment where an employee might encounter information that could be perceived as a conflict of interest. The challenge lies in accurately identifying what constitutes a reportable conflict, understanding the company's internal policies and external regulatory expectations, and acting appropriately without causing undue alarm or overlooking a genuine issue. Aramark, as a large employer, would have specific policies and likely be subject to regulations that govern employee conduct and potential conflicts of interest, especially concerning vendor relationships and procurement. The professional challenge is to navigate this situation with integrity, transparency, and adherence to established protocols. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a proactive and transparent disclosure of the potential conflict to the appropriate internal authority, typically a manager or the compliance department. This aligns with best professional practice because it upholds the principles of ethical conduct and regulatory compliance. By disclosing, the employee demonstrates honesty and allows the company to assess the situation objectively. This process ensures that any potential conflict is managed according to Aramark's policies and relevant regulations, preventing any appearance or reality of impropriety. It allows for a formal review and decision on whether the relationship poses a genuine conflict and what mitigation steps, if any, are necessary. This approach prioritizes the company's interests and maintains trust. Incorrect approach is analysis. One incorrect approach would be to ignore the situation and continue the business relationship without disclosure. This is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the fundamental principle of transparency in business dealings and could lead to a breach of Aramark's conflict of interest policy. If the relationship is indeed a conflict, This inaction could result in unfair vendor selection, compromised decision-making, and potential financial detriment to Aramark. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of integrity and a disregard for professional responsibilities. Another incorrect approach would be to discuss the situation only with the vendor and reach a private agreement to manage the perceived conflict. This is also a serious failure. It bypasses established company procedures and removes the oversight of Aramark's management and compliance functions. Such private arrangements lack transparency and cannot be verified, potentially masking a genuine conflict of interest. It also places the employee in a position of making unilateral decisions about company relationships, which is outside their authority and can lead to significant compliance risks. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately terminate the business relationship without consulting any internal authority or understanding the full implications. While seemingly decisive, this can be professionally unsound if the relationship is not a clear-cut conflict, or if terminating it causes undue harm to Aramark's operations or vendor partnerships. It fails to follow the established process for conflict resolution and may be an overreaction, demonstrating a lack of nuanced judgment and an unwillingness to engage with the company's established governance structures. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing potential conflicts of interest should adopt a systematic approach. First, they must understand their organization's conflict of interest policy thoroughly. Second, they should assess the situation against the policy's definitions and examples. Third, if a potential conflict is identified, the immediate and most professional step is to disclose it to the designated authority within the company. This allows for an informed decision-making process that balances business needs with ethical and regulatory requirements. Transparency and adherence to established procedures are paramount in maintaining professional integrity and safeguarding the organization. Question 12. The investigation demonstrates that a new operational procedure implemented by Aramark to increase efficiency in food preparation has inadvertently created a recurring slip hazard in a high-traffic kitchen area. Despite initial reports from several employees about near-miss incidents, management has continued the procedure, stating that a formal review of its safety implications will be conducted within the next quarter. After the peak season has passed, which of the following represents the most appropriate and compliant course of action for Aramark management in this situation? Option A. Proceed with the new operational procedure as planned, focusing on documenting employee feedback for the future review and assuming minor risks are acceptable for efficiency gains. Option B. Continue the new operational procedure, but instruct employees to be extra vigilant and implement temporary warning signs in the affected area. Option C. Delegate the responsibility of monitoring the hazard to the most experienced kitchen staff, trusting their informal judgment to manage the risks associated with the procedure. Option D. Immediately halt the new operational procedure until a comprehensive safety review is completed and any identified hazards are rectified. The correct answer is D. Immediately halt the new operational procedure until a comprehensive safety review is completed and any identified hazards are rectified. Explanation. The investigation demonstrates a potential conflict between Aramark's operational efficiency goals and its regulatory obligations concerning workplace safety. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need to address operational disruptions with the long-term imperative of adhering to established safety protocols. A failure to do so could lead to significant legal repercussions, reputational damage, and most importantly, harm to employees. The correct approach, which prioritizes immediate cessation of the unsafe practice and a thorough investigation, represents best professional practice because it directly aligns with the fundamental principles of regulatory compliance and ethical responsibility. Specifically, it adheres to the spirit and letter of workplace safety regulations, e.g., OSHA in the U.S., or equivalent bodies in other jurisdictions, which mandate that employers provide a safe working environment and take prompt action to rectify hazardous conditions. Ethically, it upholds the duty of care owed to employees. This approach ensures that the root cause of the safety lapse is identified and addressed, preventing recurrence and demonstrating a commitment to employee well-being. An incorrect approach that involves continuing the practice while initiating a review, even with a promise of future correction, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This is because it knowingly exposes employees to risk, violating the employer's primary duty to ensure safety. Such an action could be interpreted as willful disregard for safety regulations, leading to severe penalties. Another incorrect approach, which involves downplaying the incident and relying solely on informal assurances from the team, fails to establish a documented record of the issue and the corrective actions taken. This lack of formal process undermines accountability and makes it difficult to demonstrate compliance if audited, and it neglects the systematic approach required for effective risk management. A third incorrect approach, which focuses solely on the financial impact of stopping the practice without adequately assessing the safety risks, demonstrates a prioritization of profit over people, a clear ethical breach, and a violation of regulatory intent. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential hazards and regulatory implications. This involves consulting relevant safety policies and legal requirements. The next step is to assess the severity of the risk and the immediacy of the threat. In situations involving potential harm, the precautionary principle should guide actions, meaning that if there is a credible threat of harm, protective measures should be taken even if full scientific certainty is lacking. This is followed by implementing immediate corrective actions, thoroughly investigating the root cause, documenting all findings and actions, and communicating transparently with relevant stakeholders, including employees and regulatory bodies if necessary. Question 13. Upon reviewing a candidate's application for a position within your department, you realize the candidate is a close personal friend. You are not directly involved in the final hiring decision, but your input on the candidate's suitability is sought as part of the initial screening process. What is the most appropriate course of action to ensure regulatory compliance and uphold ethical standards? Option A. Inform your friend that you will advocate for their hiring due to your personal relationship, and then provide a positive assessment to your supervisor. Option B. Provide a positive recommendation for your friend, emphasizing their strengths without mentioning your personal relationship, as your input is only part of the initial screening. Option C. Proceed with providing your assessment of the candidate's suitability as you normally would, assuming your personal relationship will not influence your professional judgment. Option D. Disclose your personal relationship to your supervisor and recuse yourself from providing any input on the candidate's suitability, allowing the hiring process to proceed without your involvement. The correct answer is D. Disclose your personal relationship to your supervisor and recuse yourself from providing any input on the candidate's suitability, allowing the hiring process to proceed without your involvement. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires an Aramark employee to navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure compliance with company policies and ethical standards, even when faced with personal relationships. The core of the challenge lies in maintaining objectivity and fairness in decision-making processes that could be influenced by personal connections. Careful judgment is required to uphold Aramark's commitment to integrity and prevent any perception of favoritism or impropriety. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes transparency and adherence to established company policy. By disclosing the relationship and recusing oneself from decisions directly impacting the individual, the employee demonstrates a commitment to ethical conduct and avoids any appearance of a conflict of interest. This aligns with Aramark's likely internal guidelines and general principles of corporate governance, which emphasize impartiality and the avoidance of situations where personal relationships could compromise professional judgment or lead to unfair outcomes. This proactive disclosure and recusal ensures that decisions are made based on merit and business needs, not personal ties. An incorrect approach that involves proceeding with the hiring decision without disclosure or recusal would be professionally unacceptable. This failure constitutes a breach of ethical conduct and potentially violates Aramark's internal policies regarding conflicts of interest. It creates an environment where decisions might be perceived as biased, undermining trust within the organization, and potentially leading to legal or reputational damage. Another incorrect approach, such as attempting to subtly influence the decision in favor of the acquaintance, represents a more severe ethical lapse. This not only involves a conflict of interest, but also actively undermines the integrity of the hiring process, potentially leading to the selection of a less qualified candidate and violating principles of fair employment practices. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying potential conflicts of interest. This involves recognizing situations where personal relationships or interests could interfere with professional duties. The next step is to consult relevant company policies and ethical guidelines. If a conflict is identified, the professional should then consider options for mitigation, such as disclosure, recusal, or seeking guidance from a supervisor or HR department. Transparency and adherence to established procedures are paramount in maintaining professional integrity and ensuring fair and objective outcomes. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that a new automated food preparation system, designed to increase efficiency, has been implemented without a formal, cross-departmental risk assessment to identify potential food safety hazards or data privacy concerns associated with its operation. Which of the following represents the most appropriate next step for Aramark management? Option A. Immediately halt the use of the new system until a comprehensive risk assessment is completed by a dedicated team of food safety, IT security, and operational experts. Option B. Rely on the vendor's assurances of the system's safety and security and continue with the current operational plan. Option C. Proceed with the system's full rollout while instructing staff to report any immediate issues they encounter. Option D. Conduct a brief, informal review of the system's basic functions by the IT department to ensure it is technically operational. The correct answer is A. Immediately halt the use of the new system until a comprehensive risk assessment is completed by a dedicated team of food safety, IT security, and operational experts. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential gap in Aramark's risk assessment process related to the introduction of a new food service technology. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing innovation with the imperative to protect both customer safety and the company's reputation. A robust risk assessment is crucial to identify, evaluate, and mitigate potential hazards before they materialize. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted risk assessment that considers all potential impacts. This includes evaluating the technology's reliability, potential for malfunction, data security implications, and the training needs of staff. It also necessitates engaging relevant stakeholders, such as IT security, food safety experts, and operational managers, to ensure a thorough understanding of risks from various perspectives. This aligns with best professional practices in risk management, which emphasize proactive identification and mitigation to prevent adverse events and ensure compliance with relevant health, safety, and data privacy regulations. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the operational efficiency gains without adequately assessing the associated risks. For instance, prioritizing speed of implementation over thorough testing could lead to unforeseen safety issues or data breaches, violating Aramark's duty of care to its customers and potentially contravening data protection laws. Another incorrect approach would be to delegate the entire risk assessment to a single department without cross-functional input. This could result in blind spots, as a department focused solely on technology might overlook critical food safety or customer service implications. Such a narrow focus fails to meet the ethical obligation to protect all stakeholders and could lead to regulatory noncompliance if specific industry standards or health codes are not considered. Professionals should employ a structured decision-making process that begins with clearly defining the scope of the risk assessment. This involves identifying all potential risks, assessing their likelihood and impact, and then developing appropriate mitigation strategies. Continuous monitoring and review are also essential components of effective risk management. When faced with such a scenario, professionals should ask, have we considered all potential negative outcomes, and do we have a plan to prevent or manage them? This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, ethical, and compliant with all applicable regulations. Question 15. Examination of the data shows that Aramark's catering operations at a large university campus have experienced a recent increase in minor food safety incidents, such as improperly stored ingredients and occasional temperature deviations. While these incidents have not resulted in significant harm, they indicate a potential breakdown in established food safety protocols. Which of the following approaches best reflects a proactive and comprehensive risk assessment strategy for Aramark in this situation? Option A. Relying solely on the university's existing food safety inspection reports to identify and address potential risks within Aramark's operations. Option B. Focusing only on the most frequently reported minor incidents and addressing them with individual staff retraining without investigating underlying systemic issues. Option C. Implementing a comprehensive food safety training program for all staff, conducting regular unannounced audits of kitchen operations, and establishing a clear reporting mechanism for any observed deviations from protocol. Option D. Waiting for a major foodborne illness outbreak to occur before initiating a full review of all food handling and storage procedures. The correct answer is C. Implementing a comprehensive food safety training program for all staff, conducting regular unannounced audits of kitchen operations, and establishing a clear reporting mechanism for any observed deviations from protocol. Explanation: this scenario presents a professional challenge because Aramark, as a service provider, has a responsibility to identify and mitigate risks associated with its operations, particularly those that could impact client satisfaction, employee safety, or regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in moving beyond a superficial understanding of risk to a proactive and systematic approach that integrates risk assessment into daily operations and strategic planning. Careful judgment is required to prioritize risks, allocate resources effectively, and ensure that mitigation strategies are practical and sustainable. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a comprehensive and ongoing process of risk identification, analysis, evaluation, and treatment. This aligns with general principles of good corporate governance and operational management, which are implicitly expected in any professional setting, including those governed by U.S. regulatory frameworks. A systematic risk assessment allows for informed decision-making, enabling Aramark to anticipate potential problems, minimize negative impacts, and capitalize on opportunities. This proactive stance is crucial for maintaining client trust, ensuring a safe working environment, and achieving business objectives. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on reactive measures, such as addressing issues only after they occur, represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. This reactive stance can lead to repeated incidents, increased costs, reputational damage, and potential legal liabilities. It demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to uphold a duty of care to clients, employees, and stakeholders. Another incorrect approach that involves a superficial or incomplete risk assessment, perhaps by only considering obvious or easily quantifiable risks, also fails to meet professional standards. This can leave the organization vulnerable to unforeseen threats and may violate implicit or explicit requirements for robust risk management. For instance, neglecting to consider the risk of data breaches in a digital environment or failing to assess the impact of supply chain disruptions on service delivery would be a critical oversight. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve establishing a clear risk management framework. This framework should define roles and responsibilities, outline the methodology for risk assessment, and establish procedures for monitoring and reviewing risks. Professionals should be trained to think critically about potential threats and vulnerabilities across all aspects of the business. They should actively seek input from various stakeholders, including frontline employees and management, to gain a holistic understanding of risks. Furthermore, decision-making should be guided by a commitment to continuous improvement, regularly evaluating the effectiveness of risk mitigation strategies and adapting them as circumstances change. Question 16. Performance analysis shows that a recent operational incident, while seemingly minor, has brought to light a potential new risk related to supply chain integrity that was not previously documented. What is the most appropriate initial step to manage this emerging risk? Option A. Initiate a comprehensive review of all supply chain partners and implement new, stringent vetting procedures across the board. Option B. Advise all operational staff to disregard any further concerns related to supply chain integrity unless they are directly instructed by senior management. Option C. Immediately escalate the issue to the highest level of executive management without conducting any preliminary investigation. Option D. Conduct a detailed assessment to gather more information about the nature, likelihood, and potential impact of this specific supply chain integrity risk. The correct answer is A. Initiate a comprehensive review of all supply chain partners and implement new, stringent vetting procedures across the board. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in risk assessment where a newly identified, potentially significant risk emerges from an unexpected source. The professional's task is to determine the most appropriate initial response to this information. The challenge lies in balancing the need for thorough investigation with the operational realities of a business like Aramark, which relies on efficient service delivery. Overreacting could disrupt operations unnecessarily, while underreacting could expose the company to significant harm. The professional must exercise sound judgment, drawing upon their understanding of risk management principles and Aramark's operational context. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a structured, evidence-based assessment of the newly identified risk. This aligns with best professional practices in risk management, which emphasize a systematic process of identification, analysis, evaluation, and treatment. Specifically, it involves gathering more information to understand the likelihood and potential impact of the risk. This approach is professionally sound because it allows for an informed decision on the appropriate level of response. It adheres to the principles of due diligence and proactive risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly required by general business ethics and operational guidelines designed to protect company assets and reputation. While specific Aramark internal policies would guide the exact steps, the principle of informed assessment is universally applicable. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately implement broad, costly mitigation strategies without a clear understanding of the risk's magnitude or likelihood. This represents a failure in the risk assessment process. By bypassing the crucial analysis and evaluation stages, it can lead to inefficient allocation of resources and unnecessary operational disruption, potentially violating principles of sound business management and fiduciary responsibility. Another incorrect approach would be to dismiss the information without any further investigation, assuming it is not significant. This demonstrates a failure in risk identification and a lack of due diligence. It exposes the company to potential harm if the risk is indeed material, violating ethical obligations to protect the organization and its stakeholders. This approach could also be seen as a failure to adhere to any internal reporting or risk escalation protocols that Aramark would likely have in place. A third incorrect approach might be to delegate the entire assessment to a junior team member without providing adequate guidance or oversight. While delegation can be effective, abdicating responsibility for a potentially significant risk without ensuring proper handling is a failure of professional accountability and oversight. It risks the risk not being assessed competently, leading to potential regulatory or ethical breaches if the risk materializes. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such a situation should follow a structured risk management framework. This typically involves 1. Acknowledging the new information and its potential significance. 2. Initiating a process to gather more data to understand the nature, likelihood, and potential impact of the risk. 3. Analyzing this data to determine the risk level. 4. Evaluating the risk against established criteria to decide on the appropriate response. And 5. Implementing and monitoring the chosen mitigation or treatment strategy. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, proportionate, and aligned with the organization's risk appetite and objectives. Question 17. The audit findings indicate that Aramark's implementation of a new automated food preparation system has proceeded with limited input from the food safety and compliance departments, raising concerns about potential unaddressed risks. Which of the following represents the most appropriate next step in addressing this finding? Option A. Proceed with the rollout as planned, but instruct the operational staff to be extra vigilant for any issues that may arise. Option B. Immediately halt the rollout of the new system until a comprehensive cross-departmental risk assessment is completed, involving food safety, compliance, and operational teams. Option C. Authorize the IT department to conduct a follow-up risk assessment focused solely on the technical aspects of the system's integration. Option D. Rely on the vendor's pre-implementation risk assessment report and proceed with the rollout, assuming their expertise covers all relevant areas. The correct answer is B. Immediately halt the rollout of the new system until a comprehensive cross-departmental risk assessment is completed, involving food safety, compliance, and operational teams. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential weakness in Aramark's risk assessment process related to the introduction of a new food service technology. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing innovation with established safety and compliance protocols. The pressure to adopt new technologies for efficiency or customer experience can sometimes overshadow thorough risk identification and mitigation. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the benefits of the new technology do not come at the expense of regulatory compliance, employee safety, or customer well-being. The correct approach involves a comprehensive, multifaceted risk assessment that goes beyond superficial checks. This includes identifying potential hazards associated with the technology itself, e.g., data security, equipment malfunction, its integration into existing operations, e.g., impact on workflow training needs, and its interaction with customers and employees, e.g., new safety procedures, privacy concerns. This approach aligns with best professional practices by proactively addressing potential issues before they manifest as incidents. It demonstrates a commitment to due diligence, regulatory adherence, e.g., food safety regulations, data privacy laws if applicable, and ethical responsibility to stakeholders. An incorrect approach would be to rely solely on vendor assurances without independent verification. This fails to meet the professional obligation to conduct thorough due diligence. Regulatory and ethical failures here include potentially violating food safety standards if the technology impacts food handling, or data privacy regulations if customer information is involved, without proper safeguards. Another incorrect approach is to prioritize speed of implementation over a complete risk assessment. This can lead to overlooking critical risks, potentially resulting in operational disruptions, safety incidents, or non-compliance with industry standards and company policies. Ethically, this prioritizes short-term gains over long-term safety and reliability. A third incorrect approach is to delegate the entire risk assessment to the IT department, without involving operational and compliance teams. This creates a siloed view of risks, potentially missing crucial operational or regulatory implications that are outside the IT department's primary expertise. This can lead to non-compliance with operational regulations and a failure to adequately protect employees and customers. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk management framework. This includes 1. Risk identification, brainstorming all potential risks across various categories: operational, financial, compliance, safety, reputational. 2. Risk analysis, evaluating the likelihood and impact of identified risks. 3. Risk evaluation, prioritizing risks based on their severity. 4. Risk treatment, developing and implementing mitigation strategies. 5. Risk monitoring and review, continuously assessing the effectiveness of controls and updating the risk assessment as circumstances change. Collaboration across departments, operations, IT, legal, compliance, HR, is crucial to ensure a holistic understanding of potential risks. Question 18. Analysis of the most effective approach for Aramark to conduct a comprehensive risk assessment for its diverse food service and facilities management operations, considering potential hazards to employees, customers, and the business itself. Option A. A risk assessment that relies solely on historical data from similar companies in unrelated industries. Option B. A reactive risk assessment that focuses only on mitigating risks that have already resulted in incidents or near misses. Option C. A multifaceted risk assessment that incorporates hazard identification, likelihood and impact analysis, and the development of specific control measures for each identified risk, with regular reviews and updates. Option D. A risk assessment that prioritizes only the most obvious and immediate physical hazards, neglecting potential financial or reputational risks. The correct answer is C. A multifaceted risk assessment that incorporates hazard identification, likelihood and impact analysis, and the development of specific control measures for each identified risk, with regular reviews and updates. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Aramark, as a large employer, has a responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of its employees and the integrity of its operations. A risk assessment is crucial for identifying potential hazards and implementing controls. The challenge lies in selecting the most appropriate and comprehensive risk assessment methodology that aligns with Aramark's operational context and regulatory obligations, without being overly burdensome or neglecting critical areas. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic and proactive identification of potential risks across various operational domains. This aligns with general principles of workplace safety and operational efficiency, which are implicitly or explicitly governed by employment and health and safety regulations. A thorough risk assessment allows for the prioritization of mitigation efforts, ensuring that resources are allocated effectively to address the most significant threats. This proactive stance is ethically sound, demonstrating a commitment to employee welfare and business continuity, and is often a regulatory expectation for employers. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate, obvious threats fails to consider latent or systemic risks that could have significant long-term consequences. This could lead to regulatory noncompliance if specific safety or operational standards are not met due to a lack of foresight. Another incorrect approach that relies only on historical incident data might overlook emerging risks or changes in the operational environment, leaving the organization vulnerable to new threats. This reactive stance is less effective than a proactive one and may not satisfy regulatory requirements for forward-looking risk management. An approach that is overly complex and time-consuming without clear benefits can also be professionally problematic, leading to resource misallocation and potentially delaying the implementation of necessary controls. This can indirectly lead to operational inefficiencies and potential breaches of duty of care. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the scope and objectives of the risk assessment. This involves considering the specific industry, operational environment, and any relevant regulatory frameworks. Next step is to identify potential risk assessment methodologies, evaluating each for its comprehensiveness, practicality, and alignment with objectives. A critical evaluation of the pros and cons of each method, considering factors like data availability, stakeholder involvement, and the ability to identify both immediate and long-term risks, is essential. The chosen method should be adaptable and allow for regular review and updates to remain effective. Question 19. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess potential workplace hazards within Aramark's diverse operational environments. Which of the following approaches best aligns with a proactive and compliant risk management strategy for ensuring employee safety? Option A. Relying primarily on a review of past accident and injury reports to identify recurring issues and implement corrective actions. Option B. Gathering risk assessment input solely from senior management and department heads, assuming their broad oversight captures all potential issues. Option C. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that involves frontline employees in identifying and evaluating hazards specific to their daily tasks, supplemented by expert review and consideration of industry best practices. Option D. Utilizing a standardized, generic risk assessment checklist that is applied uniformly across all Aramark locations and job functions without specific adaptation. Correct answer is C. Conducting a comprehensive risk assessment that involves frontline employees in identifying and evaluating hazards specific to their daily tasks, supplemented by expert review and consideration of industry best practices. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because Aramark, as a large employer, has a responsibility to ensure a safe and healthy working environment for its employees, which includes proactively identifying and mitigating potential risks. The challenge lies in selecting the most effective and compliant risk assessment methodology that aligns with Aramark's operational context and relevant employment and safety regulations. Careful judgment is required to move beyond superficial assessments and implement a robust process that genuinely protects workers. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it emphasizes a systematic, data-driven, and collaborative process for identifying, analyzing, and evaluating risks. This aligns with general principles of occupational health and safety management, which are often codified in regulations requiring employers to take all reasonably practicable steps to ensure the health and safety of their workers. A thorough risk assessment, involving input from those directly performing the tasks, ensures that potential hazards are identified from the ground up, leading to more effective control measures. This proactive stance is ethically sound and legally prudent, demonstrating due diligence. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on historical incident data fails to account for emerging or previously unobserved risks. This is a regulatory failure because it may not fulfill the duty of care to identify all foreseeable hazards. Ethically, it is deficient as it prioritizes past events over future prevention. Another incorrect approach, relying exclusively on management opinion without frontline worker input, risks overlooking practical hazards that only those performing the work would recognize. This is a professional failure as it leads to an incomplete risk profile and potentially ineffective controls, which could have regulatory implications if an incident occurs due to an unaddressed hazard. A third incorrect approach, using a generic checklist without tailoring it to Aramark's specific operations, e.g., food service, facilities management, is also a regulatory and ethical failure. It demonstrates a lack of specific due diligence and may miss critical, context-dependent risks, thus failing to adequately protect employees. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Understanding the scope of operations and the specific work being performed. 2. Identifying relevant legal and regulatory requirements for health and safety. 3. Engaging with employees at all levels to gather diverse perspectives on potential hazards. 4. Selecting or developing a risk assessment methodology that is comprehensive, systematic, and adaptable to the specific context. 5. Documenting the assessment process and the rationale for chosen control measures. 6. Regularly reviewing and updating the risk assessment to reflect changes in operations or new information. Question 20. Operational review demonstrates that, while Aramark has robust systems for tracking financial performance and immediate operational metrics, there is a perceived gap in proactively identifying and assessing potential disruptions to service delivery that are not directly tied to historical financial losses or immediate performance indicators. What is the most effective approach to enhance the risk assessment process in this context? Option A. Rely primarily on analyzing past incident reports and financial audit findings to identify recurring operational risks. Option B. Implement a cross-functional what-if scenario planning workshop involving operational staff, management, and client representatives to identify potential vulnerabilities and their impact on service continuity. Option C. Focus risk assessment efforts exclusively on risks that have a direct and immediate quantifiable financial impact on the company. Option D. Assign the sole responsibility for identifying and assessing all potential operational risks to the internal audit department. The correct answer is B. Implement a cross-functional what-if scenario planning workshop involving operational staff, management, and client representatives to identify potential vulnerabilities and their impact on service continuity. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a challenge in risk assessment by requiring the identification of potential operational disruptions without relying on purely quantitative data. The difficulty lies in anticipating unforeseen events and their cascading effects on service delivery, which is crucial for a company like Aramark that provides essential services in diverse environments. Effective risk assessment in this context demands a forward-thinking, qualitative approach that considers human factors, external influences, and systemic vulnerabilities. Correct approach analysis. The most effective approach involves proactively identifying potential failure points and their consequences through structured brainstorming and scenario planning. This method aligns with best professional practices by encouraging a comprehensive understanding of risks beyond immediate, quantifiable threats. It fosters a culture of preparedness and resilience, which is ethically imperative for ensuring consistent service delivery and client satisfaction. Regulatory frameworks often implicitly or explicitly encourage such proactive risk management to maintain operational integrity and prevent service disruptions that could impact public health, safety, or well-being. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to solely focus on historical data and past incidents. This fails to account for novel risks or changes in the operating environment, potentially leading to a false sense of security. Ethically, this approach is deficient as it neglects the duty of care to anticipate and mitigate future harm. It also violates professional standards by not embracing a dynamic and forward-looking risk assessment methodology. Another incorrect approach is to delegate the entire risk assessment process to a single department without broader input. This can lead to blind spots and an incomplete understanding of risks that span multiple operational areas. Professionally, this is a failure of collaboration and due diligence. Ethically, it can result in overlooking risks that disproportionately affect certain client groups or employees, thus failing to uphold principles of fairness and equity. A third incorrect approach is to dismiss potential risks as low probability without a thorough analysis of their potential impact. This can lead to underestimation of critical vulnerabilities. Professionally, this demonstrates a lack of critical thinking and a superficial engagement with the risk assessment process. Ethically, it can result in inadequate resource allocation for risk mitigation, potentially leading to significant harm if a low-probability, high-impact event occurs. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic and inclusive risk assessment process. This involves engaging diverse stakeholders, utilizing qualitative and quantitative tools, and regularly reviewing and updating risk assessments. The decision-making process should prioritize understanding the potential impact of identified risks on clients, employees, and the organization's reputation, and then developing proportionate mitigation strategies. This proactive and comprehensive approach ensures compliance with professional standards and ethical obligations to provide reliable and safe services.